In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at multiple severe weather events across the central and eastern states, multiple snowfall opportunities on all corners of the United States, and also some big coastal storms, including one coming up in just a couple of days that we need to watch very, very closely. Let's go ahead and dive into things. And I mean, right off the bat, we have a very major storm across the central states here, both wintry and very, very stormy to the southeast there. Very spring-like storm. Kind of embodies that whole springtime feel where there's half kind of summer, half kind of winter here going on across this storm. Let's just jump towards tomorrow and see how things develop. We have a 988 millibar low pressure center over northern Wisconsin. Snowfall diving through Minnesota and Iowa. And then we have severe weather on the front line of this storm from the Gulf states up the Appalachian Mountain Range, and for some of the Ohio Valley back there as well, we will be dealing with some thunderstorm activity. I think it's important to note that there's a lot of bottled up cold out west and diving southward for the central states, and this is charged behind this storm. We also have surging warmth out ahead of things, and this is the ingredients for bad storms. We have the cold coming in, the warmth also coming in, and this is all going to just come together and create a really massive situation for the east. As we head towards that evening and into the next day, what we get is a bit of a cold front look from Wednesday to Thursday along the eastern seaboard here, with this cold air diving in right behind it. Very classic cold front setup. So thunderstorms cannot be ruled out for the entire East Coast, but I would say for Southern Virginia and through Eastern North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and through portions of Florida, thunderstorms seem to be a little bit more likely that far south. As we head towards the high temperatures there of Thursday, what we see is basically this cold front comes to a stall and becomes what's called a stationary front, and we have basically I know it's getting confusing, but equal push from this warmth and cold happening. So we see something along these lines happening, and that frontal boundary becomes very stationary, hence the name. And everything, instead of moving either towards the east or west along this front, it ends up just moving along it towards the north, oftentimes just like this. So this push causes everything to move up the line, and that's what we see happen here. But not only that, we actually have a low forming along this as well, and that's going to want to also ride along that frontal boundary. So let's watch it play out. And this front does start to make some progress in between Thursday and Friday, and we do see it slowly advancing towards the east, which isn't that uncommon at all. But we expect heavy rainfall and strong winds along these areas from the northern southeast all the way up into New England. And that does eventually come to an end, giving way to pretty cold air. We have a pretty big trough here over the east, and this will bring some very, very cold temperatures compared to normal. Let's take a look at what happens after this point. We're staying pretty dry in the east through the weekend. However, at the end of the weekend, Saturday into Sunday, we do see a pretty massive storm system here for the west, bringing snowfall and rainfall depending on your elevation. And what we see happen in the east is on Sunday, we get this bit of a minor storm here across the Ohio Valley into the southern mid-Atlantic or northern southeast, depending on how you look at things. And we do get some moderate rainfall in this area. I don't anticipate that it will be in the form of thunderstorms. I think mostly just showery conditions with that. And what we see happening is a low eventually forms here over Pennsylvania on the morning of Tuesday, April 2nd. And what we see is a little bit of wintry weather for the mountainous northeast. So for areas like the Adirondacks, Green Mountains, White Mountains there, those areas seeing some snowfall. But I think the biggest thing is how far north this low is, and we have this stretching cold front to the south, warm front out here to the east. So what we see is rushing warm air pushing up the east coast, and cold air trying to sink down here behind that frontal boundary here to the west. And what we end up getting is probably severe weather and thunderstorm activity from Oklahoma all the way up through Ohio and Pennsylvania here, just because of the way this thing is set up. And eventually that cold front moves further and further southward to where now we're talking about areas like Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, the deeper south, into portions of the southeast. By the time we're looking at the evening of Tuesday, April 2nd here. By that next afternoon, we see that this sinks all the way down to the deep south and southeast here, where thunderstorms and severe weather cannot be ruled out still. So definitely a very, very interesting situation there. We actually get to the next morning where there's still precipitation over the southeast. Again, thunderstorms definitely cannot be ruled out, or even severe weather. Across the northwest here on the 4th of April, we do see snowfall basically resuming as we continue to see storms move through this area. Nothing surprising here. The West has been just absolutely getting slammed by storms since about December. So all winter long, all the way up until now, they have been getting slammed by storms, both with snowfall for some areas and rainfall for others. This has been the trend for months and should not come as a surprise to anyone. GFS model here. Let's see what agreement we get here. We get this cold front along the east coast here. Again, severe weather and thunderstorms could be possible in there. As we move on, we get that very strong low. This time around, it does stay much closer to the coast here. We end up actually getting some wintry weather for portions of New England there. Definitely worth noting. We get that same kind of quick burst storm from the Ohio Valley into the southern mid-Atlantic there. And then the difference here on the GFS model versus the European model is we get a very, very cold pattern in the east for the beginning of April. And we even have a low here offshore, bringing a pretty decent snowstorm to portions of the Great Lakes, interior northeast, and portions of New England. Also, general storminess as far as maybe even thunderstorms and severe weather here across the southeast into the deeper south states there. Definitely an interesting scenario. And then we get this kind of very, very cold push all the way into the Gulf states. Take this with a grain of salt. I don't necessarily know how likely this is. I think that this appears to be very far-fetched. In my opinion, for April 5th, this would be on the severe side of things for cooldowns, even in the wintertime, let alone the beginning of April. So take this with a grain of salt. This model also wants to get us in a very wintry-like kind of nor'easter pattern where we have the cold air diving southward and storms moving in from the Gulf. Everything in this setup just feels more like January than April, obviously. Eventually, this moves offshore of the East Coast, bringing snowfall up and down the East Coast. Again, you're probably watching this and thinking to yourself, what in the world? And trust me, I'm thinking the same thing. Although this GFS model is known by weather nerds to be very much so like this, and this is pretty characteristic of it to show some wild things. I'll never forget the time when I was 13 and the GFS model called, I think, for like 2 feet of snowfall in September in southeastern Virginia. Obviously, that one didn't end up happening, but that type of stuff happens here on this GFS model. In recent years, they've updated it a lot, and it has gotten better. But over the years, it has been a lot more known to show things like this than your European model is. The Canadian model as well will do things like this often, just like this GFS is showing. So keep that in mind. The European model, in my mind, is the only one that I don't consistently see showing outlandish things like this. Obviously, they are accurate to a certain extent, but because the GFS model goes to 15 days instead of 10, I think that's where a lot of the accuracy falls off and a lot of these things happen is after that 10-day mark. Whereas the European model only goes out to 10 days. And I think that's probably for the best. Although I will be maybe the first to tell you, you might know already, but the European model is getting an upgrade this year where the European model is going to go out to 15 days as well. Very, very interesting. In the European model, they thought about actually getting rid of it and making a new model. But recent news is that they are going to keep it and actually extend it to 15 days. I haven't talked about this, and I know that this is going to be a longer portion than a lot of you would want it to be because some of you don't really care about this stuff. But for those of you that do, there is also a AI version of the European model that has been put out that has artificial intelligence involved in it, and I am very, very curious about that project, and we might even start showing it a little bit soon. Obviously not exclusively showing it, but more so checking it out, seeing what it's saying, and then maybe together we can decide if it's an accurate model or not. Although, obviously, that kind of model with the AI integration is probably going to be constantly updating itself and changing, which is basically the main benefit of those AI-powered models, is that it can see what it did wrong, figure out why it did it wrong, and then basically give itself a patch Very, very interesting stuff, and I'm excited to see how it does, more out of curiosity than anything, but hey, maybe those are going to be the most accurate models around in due time. Anyway, that was a very, very long spiel I just went on. We see that by the 10th here, again, Fantasyland, but still, we get a bit of a moderate storm moving through kind of the middle portions of the East Coast. This doesn't seem far-fetched, although just at this range, 15 days out, how likely is this to happen? Well, it's probably going to look a lot different. Oftentimes it does. Total precipitation, the West Coast does pretty well, actually slowing down from how things have been, but still just getting slammed. The more kind of Midwest states, deeper South states, Ohio Valley, Great Lakes here, we're going to be in the above average territory for precipitation for most of these areas, especially the yellows and reds, especially. Blues into a little bit of the yellows is near normal for most spots, and then your greens and grays will be below normal. For the eastern seaboard, we get that major storm kind of moving up it there this week, so that is very near. And we do end up getting a lot of 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5-inch amounts popping up here from that specific storm across the entire eastern seaboard. So keep that in mind. Flooding is going to be a big concern. We talked about this yesterday, but also winds will be present. It's not going to be as bad as last weekend's storm as far as wind is concerned. But I think that the rainfall has potential to actually be more intense than our previous storm. So back-to-back major coastal storms is really the trend here. Now, just for kind of, for fun, we're going to take a look at this GFS snowfall map. Again, seeing this snowfall all the way down south, as far south as Tennessee, North Carolina, northern Georgia, and northern Alabama on the GFS model for early April. So we will kind of just take note of this. If it happens, I swear I will never make fun of the GFS model again. But I don't think it will, obviously, so don't have to worry about that too much. I am free to keep making fun of the GFS model. The European model obviously excludes that, and then we see a lot of snowfall out west, some for the upper Midwest, and even some here for the Northeast over the course of multiple light to moderate snowstorms. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. We do upload every single day, so be sure to subscribe. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.